Today on the show, we're diving into the world of economic indicators. These are the numbers that tell us how the economy is doing, things like GDP, unemployment rates, and consumer confidence. But what do these indicators really mean? How are they calculated? And how should we interpret them? We'll break it all down for you with the help of some experts to make sense of the numbers that shape our world. My name is Joan Patterson. I was a nurse for 30 years, a widow, and the kind of mother who believed love could be measured in overtime and saved pennies. I thought sacrifice was the language of love. I was wrong. The apartment is quiet now. The clock ticks. A faint lavender scent drifts from a sachet in the drawer. And on my lap, a faded wedding photo looks back at me. David and me, outside our first apartment, too young to know how fragile things would be. He died suddenly, almost 30 years ago. I still remember the doctor's voice, the hush that followed. The night I locked myself in the bathroom and didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. That night, through tears, I whispered to the silence, "Your son will have every opportunity." That vow became my compass. My reason to get up every mornings. I became a nurse when I was 23. I thought healing others would heal me too. The hospital became my home. My shifts blurred into one another. Day and night no longer meant anything. I worked until exhaustion lived in my bones. Dinner was whatever I could grab between calls. Sometimes it was coffee gone cold on the counter. Sometimes a granola bar at 2 a.m. When Sterling, my son, was little, I'd come home after a 16-hour shift, quietly slip off my shoes, and stand by his bed just to watch him sleep. There were dark circles under my eyes. My hands smelled faintly of antiseptic, but when I looked at him, every bruise of fatigue felt like purpose. I mended uniforms, clipped coupons like prayers, and watched every deposit into the small account I called Sterling's future fund as if it were a sacred promise. When Sterling brought home straight A's, I put them on the fridge with pride. When he asked, "Mom, are you tired?" I smiled and said, "No, sweetheart, just charging up for tomorrow." But I was tired, so tired I forgot what my own laughter sounded like. When Sterling got into NYU, I sat at the kitchen table that night, the acceptance letter trembling in my hand. Numbers danced in my mind, tuition, rent, books, but over the noise of fear, I heard my own voice whisper, "You promised." So I cashed savings, took loans, signed up for overtime. I believed happiness would follow if I just worked hard enough. 4 years later, I sat in a crowded auditorium, clapping until my palms burned when they called Sterling's name. His smile reached me across the sea of faces. For that one moment, I felt complete. That ache in my chest wasn't fatigue, it was pride. I had kept my promise. After graduation, Sterling found a job in marketing. He called me often at first, every Sunday, sometimes twice a week. "Mom, guess what? They're promoting me." I'd grin, alone in my small kitchen, the phone warm in my hand, and say, "I always knew you'd shine, baby." Then one day he said, "Mom, I met someone." Her name was Illa. She was beautiful, in that polished, magazine-perfect way. She smelled of perfume and confidence. The first time I met her, she brought tulips and called me Mrs. Patterson. "Call me Joan," I said, smiling. "Mrs. Patterson sounds like my mother-in-law." She laughed politely but didn't use my first name again that night. Sterling looked at her the way I had once looked at David, as if the world had found its center. When they got engaged, Illa spoke about the wedding with precision. "We're thinking of a small ceremony at the country club," she said. "Something elegant, intimate, only 200 guests." I swallowed the cost and said, "If that's what you both want." She smiled sweetly. "Sterling says you're amazing with finances. You'll help us stay organized, right?" That was my first warning, a question that wasn't really a question. When they bought their house in Hyde Park, I co-signed the mortgage. When the cars and the down payments needed just a little help, I assumed that was what mothers were for. At least that's what I told myself. Small things changed first. My stories, the ones I'd told since Sterling was little, began to meet with blank stares, phones in hands, polite sighs. "We've heard that one before, Mom." Illa would smile with a blade hidden in her lips. "You're so cute," she said once when I showed her my pot roast recipe. "We use air fryers now." Sterling laughed. But he didn't look at me. I pretended it didn't hurt, but it did. The home that had once been mine, Sunday dinners, board games, laughter, now felt like a stage where my lines had been cut. At Christmas, Ela gave me a digital photo frame. "So you can feel connected," she said. There was only one photo inside, their honeymoon. One evening, I overheard them arguing in the kitchen. Ela's voice, sharp and tired. "She's always here. Can't she stay at her place more?" Sterling whispered something too soft to hear. Then Ela again. "She needs to move on. We have our own life." I stood in the hallway, holding a plate of cookies I'd baked for them. The warmth from the oven still clung to my skin, but inside, I went cold. The next morning, I left early, left the cookies on the counter. There was a note on top. "Thanks for everything." The house was perfect that year. Candles, golden tablecloth, the smell of turkey filling every corner. I brought my old cranberry recipe, the one David used to love. As dinner began, I felt like maybe, just maybe, things were better. I laughed with Sterling's colleagues, helped Ila's mother set the table. For a moment, I almost belonged again. Then, mid-conversation, I began one of my old stories, about a burnt turkey from Sterling's childhood, a memory that used to make him laugh. He cut me off, his tone flat. "Shut up, Mom, nobody cares." The room froze. Ila looked at me over her glass of wine, smiling just enough to say everything she didn't have to say. The words hit harder than any slap. I stood up quietly. "Excuse me," I said. "I need some air." No one followed me. I sat in my car for almost an hour, staring at the glow of their house, at the silhouettes moving inside. The laughter rose again, muffled through the glass. That night, something inside me stopped asking for permission to exist. Back in my apartment, I sat on the floor and pulled out a metal box I'd kept under my bed for years. Deeds, insurance papers, savings certificates, receipts, all the quiet proof of a life spent giving. Each page felt heavier than paper. It was time, my time, folded and signed away. For decades I had believed that to belong, I had to give everything. That love meant sacrifice, and silence was virtue. But love without respect is servitude. I looked at the wedding photo again, David smiling, my eyes full of hope. "What would you tell me now?" I whispered. Maybe he would have said, "Enough. Joan, you've done enough." That night I decided to act, not from anger, but from self-preservation. I called my lawyer the next morning. "Good morning, Joan," he said, surprised. "Everything all right?" "Not exactly," I replied. "I need to make some changes." Over the next week, I redirected everything I could. The nursing scholarship in David's name, assets to fund it, emergency savings into an account only I could access. I requested removal from the co-signed mortgage. The car insurance, mine no longer. It wasn't vengeance. It was math. The balance was finally in my favor. 3 days later, the calls began. First, polite. "Mom, where are you?" "We just want to talk." Then anxious. "Joan," the tow truck took the car. "What's going on?" Then angry, like, "You can't do this to us." I listened to every voicemail once. Then I deleted them all. Each deleted message felt like a brick being lifted off my chest. I left at dawn. One suitcase. A framed photo of David and Sterling. A small jar of beach sand from a trip long ago. The bus rolled south, past cities, fields, memories. With every mile, my breathing steadied. When I reached St. Augustine, the ocean waited for me like an old friend. I rented a small apartment, 1 bedroom, sea view, balcony. The walls were white and empty, like a blank page. The first night I stood barefoot, watching the moon pull the tide in and out. The sound was endless, forgiving. I whispered to the waves, "I'm still here." Days found a rhythm. I joined a small clinic, part-time. The patients were kind, the pace gentle. My hands were steady again, not from duty, but joy. The nurses there called me Miss Joan. They didn't know my story, just my work. I liked that. After shifts, I'd walk the beach, collect shells, watch children build castles that the sea always reclaimed. It used to make me sad, the way everything we build is temporary. But now it felt honest. I started journaling again. Small things. What I cooked, what I saw, what I felt. At first, the pages were awkward, full of hesitations. Then they became alive, like I was learning to speak again after years of silence. Sometimes I'd sit on the balcony, tea in hand, the wind in my hair, and think of Sterling. I didn't hate him. I just hoped someday he'd understand. Weeks passed. Then months. The calls stopped. One morning, I opened my email and found a short message from Sterling. "Mom, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. I hope you're okay." I stared at it for a long time, then closed my laptop. I didn't reply, not yet. Some apologies need silence to breathe. Every small act became freedom. Buying groceries with my own card. Planting a small herb garden on the balcony. Waking up without an alarm. I funded the first scholarship that spring. A young nursing student named Lila received it. When she wrote a thank you letter, I cried. Not out of sadness, but because someone, somewhere, would start a new life from what I had once thought was wasted. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was just unseen by those who chose not to look. A year later, I visited the city again for the scholarship ceremony. Sterling attended by chance, like he'd been invited through an alumni connection. When our eyes met, he froze. "Mom?" he said softly. I smiled, shook hands with the dean, and accepted a small plaque in David's name. Sterling approached after the ceremony. "You look different," he said. "I feel different," I replied. He hesitated. "I was awful to you," I nodded. "You were young. You'll learn." He wanted to say more, but I didn't need more. Closure isn't a door slammed shut. It's a window quietly open to the sea breeze. Back in St. Augustine, I stood on the shore, the horizon wide and forgiving. Nobody who has built a life for others has to shout to be heard. My silence was not surrender. It was my declaration of existence. They wanted me invisible, so I made my absence the loudest thing in the room. There were no fireworks, no applause. Only small, enormous acts of taking myself back. A scholarship for nurses, money where it could help strangers, mornings filled with sunlight, and laughter that finally belonged to me. If you've ever given until you had nothing left, if you've ever mistaken exhaustion for love, listen carefully. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it rearranges papers, locks the drawer, packs a bag, and walks away toward the ocean. Sometimes strength is silence, the kind that fills a room long after you've left it.